Hi everyone, I'm Allegra Spender, the member for Wentworth, and I wanted to talk to you about the hate crimes legislation that's come in front of the House. I've just come from the House where there has been a motion passed against anti-Semitism, and I think motion was really important. I moved it because this is about sending a really clear message that all the communities across our country stand against hate and stand against intimidation. But it's also important that we back up the words of this House with also action. And this is why I'm putting forward amendments in relation to the hate crimes legislation that is in front of the House this week. So let me tell you about those amendments. What I'm seeking to do in this legislation is to include an offence for serious vilification. It was part of the original drafting. It has been removed. I'm seeking to bring it back again. And the reason why I'm seeking to do this is because I believe, and this is really backed by Mike Burgess from ASIO, when he said, words matter. You know, we are a country that values our cohesion, values our diversity, but words matter, and it matters in terms of what it leads to in the future. Words are the start of many things that we don't want as a country. And so when we consider how to stop anti-Semitism, but frankly, how to stop different types of hatred in our community, we need to consider how words are being used to drive some of this. Now, I'll give you sort of two examples that have really stuck with me, and why I believe this legislation needs to be strengthened. One is from a sort of neo-Nazi protest. I think it was in Melbourne, where people were holding a sign saying, "Destroy pedo freaks." This is vilification. This is spreading and provoking animosity and hatred in our community. And nothing about the government's current legislation would make sure that wasn't part of our society. At the same time, from the Jewish community, certain preachers have used things such as calling for the final solution in relation to the Jews, or calling sort of the Jewish community in a total sort of bloodthirsty criminals. And again, when we look at what we're dealing with in anti-Semitism, we can see that those words matter in terms of what actually happens as a country. Now, I know, and I'm very, very conscious of the question of how does this impact in terms of freedom of speech. That is the question I've been really grappling with, really personally. And this is, where I have landed and having consulted, pretty broadly, is that, of course we need to preserve freedom of speech. It is part of our democracy. But we also need to have guardrails in terms of the provocation and the whipping up of animosity and hatred in our society, because that has a cost to our country as well. And we need to find an appropriate balance. The balance we're striking or trying to strike is based on the legislation that has been in WA for the last 20 years. They have had this legislation. I know New South Wales is contemplating some legislation. Victoria is contemplating legislation. And I do think it is important, for this Parliament to be considering joint legislation as well, because that is part of the national leadership piece. It is part of the leadership, I think, as an organisation that we can do as a country. This is not about restricting what people can debate at all. That's a really important part, I think, of my community, where there are a lot of disagreements. But this is to say, where you seek to provoke hatred, where you seek to build animosity and hatred and intimidation in our community, we need to have guardrails around that, and that is what I'm seeking. I'm working, as I said, I'm briefing and in conversation with the government, with the opposition, with the crossbench, and also with members, different groups, including some of the people here today, to try and get this balance right and see if we can find something that is right there. I'll now ask Anna Brown, CEO of Equality Australia, to add some words, please.
Thank you. My name is Anna Brown. I'm the CEO of Equality Australia. The laws currently before the Commonwealth Parliament are a welcome step, but they will only prevent hate if they stop it at its source. And the member for Wentworth's bill does that by prohibiting serious vilification. We've seen all too clearly that hate speech can lead to real-world impacts, violence, and deep and lasting harm for many within the community. And while freedom of expression is absolutely vital, it can't come at the cost of protecting vulnerable communities from the impacts and harm caused by hatred and violence. The LGBTIQ+ community has seen shocking and appalling attacks in recent times. Sadly, our events are being threatened and intimidated, queer formals and pride marches. We've seen a series of bashings. A couple in Rundle Street Mall in Adelaide attacked when they were holding hands. Another couple in a parking reservoir in Melbourne attacked with a machete. We've seen men attacked using the Grindr app and being accused of being pedophiles. There is a serious escalation of hatred and violence against our communities. We only need to look at the events outside Victorian Parliament where trans and gender diverse people were targeted and neo-Nazis called for their destruction. It is a scary and frightening world out there, and this Parliament must stand against hatred as well as violence and stand together against this sort of harm that our community faces. The noisy fringe groups are getting louder and louder, and we're seeing their threats and their hatred escalate into violence. It's time for the Parliament to act. The threat has never been more real and more urgent, and the need for protection greater. And this bill before Parliament will take an important step forward, but it needs to be strengthened. It needs to go beyond the current drafting and realise the commitment the Attorney-General made to deal with the serious vilification that is affecting our communities right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I think that is, the violence and intimidation against the LGBTQIA+ community is often misunderstood and underreported. This is a huge and very serious, I think, intimidation and in the community, and again, one that we as a country, I don't believe can stand for. I'd like to now ask Danielle Tishman, who's the National Co-President of the Australian Union of Jewish Students, to talk briefly about the impact on the Jewish community of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Danielle Tishman. I'm from the Australasian Union of Jewish Students, and we're grateful for leaders from across the political spectrum like Allegra for their support combating anti-Semitism and working to strengthen our hate crime laws. Jewish students are frightened. We're frightened to go back on campus. We've seen the rise in incidents this year on our streets, on our campuses, and university campuses, which were a safe space, are not. Anti-Semitism and all forms of vilification are not a political issue, and we hope laws like these will be able to combat the disgusting acts of hatred we have seen on our streets and on our campuses. We also believe that alongside stronger laws, more funding for social cohesion initiatives, multicultural education, and better training at workplaces and university is needed to remove hate from our society. Thank you.
Do people have any questions?
You spoke about engagements with the government and the opposition. Have they given any indications to you that they're likely to support this proposal that you put forward?
We're still in discussions, and the motion that I put forward today in relation to particularly anti-Semitism was to say, look, was actually about words, but also saying we need to. There's a lot of discussion in the motion today that people need to back up, nice words with strong actions, and that's what I'm calling on both sides of both of the major parties and also the crossbench to do.
Is there the risk that this amendment, which adds a level of complexity to the bill, potentially delays the process and means it can't be passed this week, or do you think that it's clear enough what the impact will be for the government and the opposition to make a judgment?
Look, I would hope that there is clear enough to make a judgment on it. This is based very significantly on the WA legislation that has been, as I said, in existence for over 20 years. And we've tried to be relatively faithful to that. So I do not want to see the bill delayed at all. But I do think this is important. This serious vilification, was flagged last year by the Attorney General as potentially going to be included, but then was removed. And this is why we're seeking to bring it back, because there are parts of the whole of the Australian community, including the LGBTQIA+ community, religious communities such as the Jewish community and other groups, and disability communities and others who are targeted and not protected currently under this legislation.
The criminalising of promoting hatred has to have a defence, and there is a defence, I think, in your amendment.
Perfect profile there now.
In some circumstances, people might be able to within the political space.
I'll go to shoot. I'll tell you the first thing.
Can you just talk about the potential defence in somebody who may be accused of promoting hatred? Because that's an issue in Victoria right now, with the state move to pass a similar kind of.
Sure. Look, we're to be honest in discussions in relation to that. I think the big point here is that a criminal offence has to prove intent. So the intent has to be to provoke hatred. It's not that you would assume under normal journalistic and sort of representation, if your intention is not to provoke hatred, therefore you shouldn't need that sort of defence. So that is why, and we're working on the wording on exactly that. But I think that we need to come back to what's the offence. It's to provoke and promote hatred. A journalism, someone who's a journalist or something like that shouldn't, that shouldn't be an issue in that case. Yeah, it is. It's about public. So the piece is about sort of public vilification. And again, I'd refer people, back to the WA legislation, where I think it has been very, it's been lightly used. And I know that there is, genuine and real concern about these questions. I think these are fair and important questions to ask. But I think we should look at the precedents that we have in this case, which is that legislation, and consider how has it impacted people in WA and the appropriateness in that case. Yes, there have been at least one conviction in WA, and so I can happy to provide further details if you would like in that situation.
But if your amendments don't get support, would you be happy with the unamended bill, or is that no better than no bill?
No, it is the bill. I echo Anna's words. I think that the bill as it is the amendments the government has put forward are better than where we are right now, because and I think they're important additional protections for our community. But I do believe that this is a moment to have this conversation about how much further should we go. This is a national conversation. We can see we're having it state by state basis. I do believe there's a national role for leadership to play here as well. I'm afraid I'm going to have to run because I've got to sort of get to something before question time. So I think I'm probably going to call it there unless anyone urgent other questions. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Anna.
It's probably both. And what we need to do is actually start to track and record these incidences of hate. We have reports made to us. We also read the media, but we absolutely need to do a better job of collecting this data and monitoring trends. It's just frightening out there for our communities, as it is for other communities as well, which is why this legislation is so welcome. But as the other speaker was saying, it needs to also be matched with other policy measures, better documentation, coordination across the states and territories, leadership on these issues from our national government to make sure that the country's working together to solve this problem.
On the legislation in Victoria, there's now debate on the genuine political purpose defence being included in the legislation. Would you be concerned if the introduction of these laws was delayed by this debate that's ongoing?
The Victorian bill delayed, or this bill?
Yes.
I mean, we're very supportive of the Victorian bill. It broadens protections to our communities. We have a number of laws across the country that protect against racial and religious vilification, but not other communities. So the extension's very welcome. We don't have a major issue with that defence, but certainly would be very willing to discuss with the government, discuss with other stakeholders whether further amendments are required, because the expansion and the broadening of the bill to protect all vulnerable communities is absolutely vital. And as we all know, this is an urgent and pressing issue for our communities.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Why don't you jot down your number as well?
Yeah, sure, please. 0422 362 353.
You're based here in town.
I am based in Sydney.
Oh, Sydney.
Are you currently?
Sorry guys, we're going to kick off before questions.
Oh, yeah, no worries.